They did ask me to provoke you. This is the first attempt.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics going on at the moment. Why does she need to do it? I can't stand this. I can't stand this. I can't stand this.
I can't stand this. I can't stand this. I can't stand this.
Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this. There's too much politics.
Thank you. She can't stand this. What we're witnessing here is a one-person Greek chorus lamenting the exhausting playing out of a bad, seemingly interminable soap opera. It's a cry of pain from an increasingly rare species, the democratic citizen. We speak often about the health of the human body. Bodies are measured, bodies are fixed, bodies are buried, bodies are nurtured towards normative ambitions of well-being. But what about the well-being of the body politic? That space that frames our shared social existence within which we play out our private pains. How do we take the pulse of civic vitality? How do we recognize the symptoms of democratic self-harm? Because we don't live our lives confined within corporeal silos, but are repeatedly thrown into intersubjective spaces of animation and agitation, the matter of political well-being cuts to the core of our social experience, and I want to suggest cuts to the core of all of our discussions about social health. My long-term project as a professor of political communication in this university has been to reflect upon and seek to innovatively represent the various ways in which politics becomes a felt experience. It gets on people's nerves. It attacks them. It creates anxiety. It exhausts them. And I think, from conversations with a number of clinical psychologists, it is intimately related to many conditions in which people try to escape from its consequences. What does it mean then for a society to feel nervous, paranoid, or agitated? When we speak about the anger of the left behind, the factious nervousness of communities split by Brexit, the shame experienced by groups treated with persistent disrespect, the despondency of economic insecurity, or as Lauren Berlant puts it, I quote, the physical wearing out of a population and the deterioration of people in that population that is very nearly a defining condition of their experience and historical existence. When we speak of those things, how can we creatively represent these barely registered and opaquely articulated atmospheres, moods, and pervasive feelings? How can we show the ways in which political feelings define, distort, and smother our social situations? Well, let me try to answer those questions in two ways, briefly. And the first is to talk about the intimate relationship between political health and public feeling, and then to turn to the kind of representational strategies through which democratic feelings might be mediated. Let me say something then about where we are politically. 21st century democracies are based on a new kind of politics, a politics that depends increasingly upon the mobilization of affect, upon making people feel certain ways. Politicians have become experts in dispositional priming, making people worried about things they wouldn't otherwise be worried about, ambitious for things they wouldn't otherwise want, satiated by things that leave us feeling empty. Political communication increasingly entails opportunist appeals to emotional attention. The contemporary function of politics often seems to be that of making people feel okay about not being okay. So, affect, the substance of the arts, is central now to our polity. And at the same time, there is a growing fusion between politics and performance, and political leaders are increasingly required to serve as containers for the projection of amorphous public fantasies. And Donald Trump is, of course, the quintessential object of such projection. Through a strange performance of populist ventriloquism, he and his followers find themselves entangled in a web of misplaced trust, each believing that the other is their mirror reflection. Trump thinks he's the people think that Trump is them. As politics develops in these alarming directions, the health of democracy becomes more precarious. Pervasive uncertainty becomes the norm. The political air becomes noxious, and collective well-being is likely to suffer. My most recent research, ongoing, is about Brexit, not exploring people's reasons for supporting or opposing it. This wouldn't be of interest to my kind of scholarship, but trying to get at how it feels to be caught up in this indeterminate drama, to be seized by political sensations that shape and shake subjectivity. Now, I always begin my research in the same way, and we've heard a lot of methodological innovation, and my methodology is dinosaur-like. I begin my research by conducting a lot of very, very long, in-depth interviews. I talk to people, sometimes for hours. Sometimes they think we've got married during the course of it. I delve into reasons of their feelings that exceed cognition. I don't want to know what they know. I want to know how they feel about it. I want to hear their stories. I love the term therapeutic implotment that was used by an earlier presenter. What I do in interviewing bears some similarity to artistic encounters, because it's not about revealing or disclosing truth, but acknowledging the complex ambiguities of perspective. What I'm interested in is what it's like to feel something, and very often to feel several things at the same time. In such a situation, both the interviewer and the interviewee are engaged in a process of mutual improvisation, the end result of which is at best something that neither of them ever intended to disclose. My interviews on Brexit helped me to recognise three unsettling aspects of the post-Brexit atmosphere. The first was about the frustration of communication failure. You don't need to read all of this because I'm going to publish it anyway. But it's interesting because it's about people feeling that they never really had the discussion which is supposed to precede the decision. The second theme that came out of it was the theme of affective ambivalence that followed the divided decision. People are essentially saying, we thought we'd made a decision and we thought we were supposed to feel one way, but we found ourselves not knowing how to feel. And the third theme that came out of it was the fear of disappointment and embarrassment about having made a massive decision. So frustration, ambivalence, disappointment, embarrassment, these are all abstract, affective intensities. You can't measure them through a survey, neither should you try to do so. You can't represent them through a graph. But if you ignore them, you are overlooking the many ways in which intense feelings throw common sense perceptions into crisis. So what are the available strategies for representing the health or the malaise of a seminal political moment like the one we're in now, hovering in an existential way between thinking that we've left something and thinking that we're arriving at something? Earlier this year, I collaborated with the choreographer Sharon Watson to produce a contemporary dance piece. You might not be surprised to learn that I'm not a contemporary dancer, reflecting the public mood in the aftermath of the Brexit referendum. That's what we wanted. We wanted to get at the feeling. Working with dancers from the Northern School of Contemporary Dance, a wonderful place, Sharon choreographed the piece based on themes that emerged from my Brexit interviews, and the interviews became part of the dance. In what ways, then, might the aesthetic language of contemporary dance communicate deep political feelings that are difficult to capture by using the conventional vocabulary of political analysis, such an impoverished vocabulary in my experience? I believe that dance offers a way of articulating the unfolding of feelings as generators and reflectors of political signification. The unfolding, a movement in motion, a feeling in motion. When we feel moved to act or retreat or explode or tense up, these convulsions are not merely a lower form of speech, but a particular form of consciousness by which the body senses what it feels to be right or wrong, what constitutes a threat or an opportunity, what inspires and what disappoints, how to take a position when faced with a broad menu of potential postures, contractions, and thrusts. When we take a political position, we invariably assume an embodied posture, a way of connecting to the world that speaks to the world. And it is artists, like yourselves, who are the experts in connecting the sensible to the intelligible, by intending to those enigmatic aspects of feeling that social science, for example, has such difficulty with. So let me return in conclusion to Brenda of Bristol, whose exasperated refrain has become a sort of comical theme tune for post-Brexit balmy Britain. Let me ask some questions of a normative kind on her behalf. What would need to happen to make Brenda happy again? How would politics need to be performed for it to generate enthusiasm and reparation and vitality rather than exhaustion and anxiety? What sort of aesthetic moves would make democracy feel less like bad theatre? I think there's a huge scope for partnership here. And being an academic opportunist, that's why I came today. Thank you.